Believe me, I know that hindsight is 2020, but Aaron Brooks really should have won gold out at the Paris Olympics.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooks actually should have won gold at that 86 kilogram weight class. Overall, did the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club end up disappointing in Paris? And looking ahead at Penn State Wrestling's upcoming schedule. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all of its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the discussion as I'll begin things with Aaron Brooks. He should have won gold. I know hindsight's 2020, but when I look back at the matches that he had, particularly against Ramazanov of Bulgaria, who eventually went on to win gold, there are two things that I want to point out about that matchup. And of course, there's going to be some hypotheticals in here, but hear me out. The first point that I want to make about all of this, the difference between a gold and a bronze medal here for Aaron Brooks was literally 5 seconds. 5 seconds. If Brooks holds Ramazanov at bay when they're in that scramble and then ultimately Ramazanov gets the match-winning move, if he holds on to him for 5 more seconds, he advances and he faces Yazdani. So that was the difference. It was not only 5 seconds, it was 1 point. That was the difference between a bronze medal and a gold medal. You have 5 fewer seconds, or if Brooks is just able to hold on to Ramazanov and not allow any scoring in that 5 seconds, Brooks is a gold medalist. He lost by a point. That's how close this is, and that's how close the gap, the margin of error and talent is when it gets to this level on the senior circuit. And the second part of this is I need an explanation on this. I posted this to my X account, just kind of posing the question, what happened in that match between Brooks and Ramazanov when they went through their scramble? Some people might know what I'm referring to here, but did anybody else notice that Brooks should have went up 5-2? There was that scramble about halfway through the match, and Brooks was able to get Ramazanov's hips down on the mat. He ended up posting. He had the legs, and then the ref even signaled 2, but the score stayed the same. It stayed 3-2. No points were awarded. Score didn't adjust. It should have been 5-2. Because Brooks had a takedown, the referee signaled a takedown, and yet no points were rewarded. Okay, so I understand, before I move forward with my point about this, I understand there are multiple scoring officials, so it's not only the main referee, but there's judges at the scoring table, so they all need to confirm or deny that. But if the main referee is going to signal 2 points, and then maybe another judge disagrees, why wasn't there a review? Why wasn't there a challenge? And I think that everybody's just kind of glossed over that fact that this happened, that Brooks ended up getting a takedown that was signaled by the referee, and then nothing happened. There was no discussion about it. Everybody just kind of ignored it. And there hasn't been a lot of discussion about it. So if I'm off point here, of course, let me know in the comments. I'm asking about this more than I am trying to assert in this case. So maybe there's someone out there smarter than me that can explain exactly what happened. I'm going to go back and say again, hindsight is 2020. But if Brooks moves on for either of those two reasons, the 5 seconds are different. He ends up getting that takedown that honestly I think should have been awarded there if the referee's going to signal that. No challenge, no review, not sure what happened. But Brooks would have beaten Yazdani if he had made it. Yazdani, now this is taking into account that Yazdani was not 100%. I don't even know if he was 50%. In that match against Ramazanov, I don't know how many of you had watched it, but did not look good with the arm, the wrist. I'm not sure what was actually going on, but it was clear he could not use half of his upper body. And it ultimately led to his defeat. So Brooks Probably would have capitalized on that, being the better wrestler, the more healthy wrestler, the healthier wrestler. Brooks looked perfectly fine, especially after that tilt. Now that's kind of what impressed me above all else, is that tilt that he had to fend off from Ramazanov that ultimately led to the sequence in those final 5-10 seconds there at the match, is that he was perfectly fine. He didn't show any sorts of physical pain, mental pain, right? That was a 4-3 defeat in the final 5 seconds. That takes some serious mental toughness, especially when you missed out on it. That didn't happen in the prelims. That happened in the semifinals for an opportunity to face Yazdani, who everybody said you would not be able to beat. Who everybody said that, oh, because David Taylor's a better matchup, Aaron Brooks doesn't belong. But he defeated Shapiev, one of the top wrestlers internationally, 5-0. That was a very convincing bout from Aaron Brooks to bounce back from what happened physically and mentally against Ramazanov, to go up against one of the best wrestlers recognized internationally, and you win 5-0. Shapiev had no answer offensively, his offensive game, but Brooks was so stout defensively to shut out that kind of top-tier wrestler. Brooks is 24 years old. This was his first official senior circuit. This was going from folk style to freestyle in a matter of months. And again, I know that it's relative, right? It's still wrestling at the end of the day. But when your craft, your technique is focused on the NCAA season and folk style, and then you got to pivot and go to freestyle against the best of the best in the world at the Olympics, and you still medaled. Brooks was the best wrestler at 86 kilos for the United States. There's not an argument to be made for Zahid Valencia, David Taylor. He defeated them both. He didn't get in there by chance. He didn't get to the Olympics by luck. He did it because he earned it, and he earned a bronze medal. But I'm saying he probably could have done better, because hindsight's 2020. But given all of those circumstances, it's hard to. It really is probably more difficult for Brooks himself to think back about. I'm sure he's content with the bronze medal, but when you think about it, really should have came home from Paris with a gold medal. Now, did the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club disappoint overall at the Olympics? They sent 4 of their members. Well, yeah, they did. We'll discuss that on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride each and every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into that MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So in short, yes, I hate to say it, but the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club did disappoint. Part of this has to do with the fact that expectations here were pretty lofty, to put it kindly. All of Brooks, Snyder, Kyle Dake were expected to contend for gold. I think the expectation was at least one of them was to win gold, most likely Dake, and that was pretty much indicated from the betting odds. I think Kyle Dake was minus 900 to win gold. And then Zane Rutherford was, I think there was optimism that he was going to medal. And none of that happened. None of those gold medal contenders won gold. Zane Rutherford did not medal. And it goes back to my point that I said that with this being the Olympics, the 16 best wrestlers at each weight class from around the world, may I remind everyone, are there in the same tournament. So yes, you're going to have favorites, you're going to have underdogs, but the gap in talent is so close. Anyone could have won on any given day, and there is matchup dependency too. Matchup is very important. Sometimes you are just going to have a more favorable matchup against wrestler A than you are against wrestler B. And if wrestler A is on your side of the bracket and wrestler B is not, sometimes there's an element of luck involved in this. Again, the gap in talent is just so close here. It really is. And I think everybody understands that. Overall, I don't think this is a complete disappointment, obviously, because Aaron Brooks won a bronze medal at 24 years old. David Taylor did not do that. And Kyle Dake took home his second bronze medal. 2 out of the 4 Nittany Lion Wrestling Club members did, in fact, medal. Zane Rutherford's circumstances were unfortunate. Ends up drawing the best wrestler pound for pound in that weight class, and did apparently suffer a concussion out in training for the Paris Olympics. So when he was overseas, ended up suffering an injury and then withdrew because it was not he could not go on, he could not continue to wrestle. So that's just a tough break, an unfortunate break for Rutherford because he suffered an injury out there. The symptoms probably came up in the middle of the match in the prelims there, and then it was just too tough to try to wrestle back through the consolation bracket. So if you're dealing with all of that beforehand, it's even tougher to deal with that, to wrestle against the guy while you're dealing with concussion-like symptoms. Don't forget, Roman Bravo Young's in this conversation as well. Even though he was, again, focusing on the United States wrestlers, he was a member of Team Mexico and ended up losing his one and only match and did not wrestle back through consolations. He was knocked out immediately. Kyle Snyder's case is very interesting. 1 gold at 20 years old. Silver at 24 years old, and then 4th place at 28, did not win the bronze medal. It's hard for someone to justify that Kyle Snyder got worse over time or took a step back. I can't agree with that. Because the 28-year-old Kyle Snyder is a better version of the 20-year-old Kyle Snyder. In a hypothetical wrestle-off, the 28-year-old Kyle Snyder would defeat the 20-year-old Kyle Snyder. But what is more logical, what is more likely here, is that the competition, frankly, just got better. I think that's the more likely reason. Again, on any given day here, matchups have a lot to do with this too. Sometimes the matchup is just better for that opponent than it is for the likes of Kyle Snyder. But when you talk about the expectations, when you talk about the optimism for this group that was sent, and that's overall. Spencer Lee was in contention for gold. Ended up finishing with silver, and obviously he's not happy about it. Mason Paris, same thing, kind of like Roman Bravo Young. So speaking for the United States wrestling team here, Paris was knocked out after his one and only match. But back to the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club itself, yes, they did disappoint solely because they fell short of expectations. It wasn't a disaster, but at the end of the day, it was a disappointment. And that's because the bar was set very high and it wasn't met. I think that's just the fact of the matter, that when you set goals and you don't reach them, it ends up just being a disappointment. I think that's just the, c'est la vie in cases, since it was the Paris Olympics. I think that's just life when in respect to that. Let's turn the conversation back to Penn State wrestling. Penn State hasn't had its schedule released, but we now know one opponent officially. When should we expect Penn State to release its full schedule? Well, I'll tell you more about that coming up here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer of those games, and the sports aren't exactly sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. And all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all of its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. And if you look over at FanDuel.com, the Phillies are off. They will take on the Marlins on Tuesday, but the Pirates are back in action for a Monday slate against the San Diego Padres, still on the road as part of that West Coast trip. Now, the Pirates are underdogs. They are plus 136 on the money line. The total is set at 8. If you like those lines, you can bet that right now over at FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel.com. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We got an update for Penn State wrestling's schedule, and it's not because it came from Penn State University. We know an official date and time of one regular season match, and that's because American University has been pretty proactive with its schedule release, announced that it would be wrestling Penn State, and now since it updated its schedule, we now know that Penn State will face American University Friday, February 21st, 2025. Can't believe it. We're almost there to 2025. 7 p.m. in Rec Hall. So that's kind of that out-of-conference matchup to finish up the season, fine-tune things before the Big Ten wrestling tournament, and then ultimately the NCAA championships. Again, this announcement did not come from Penn State, but rather American. Penn State, when is Penn State going to drop its official schedule, or at least maybe an opponent or two? Well, the way that this usually goes, and diehard Penn State wrestling fans know this, you can anticipate the schedule to be released sometime early October. That first week of October seems to be the target date with the season. The tournaments, usually those early season tournaments normally start around the first or the second week of November. And then the regular season, those dual meets happen later on in November into December, right? So that is the target date, early November, first week of October, for that schedule to be released. But maybe there's some anticipation here that we might know about the schedule earlier than normal. So it's not going to be for some time, but maybe at the end of September do we find out, because what if there is that Beaver Stadium duel this season? What if that ends up being on the schedule? Because the only way they're going to pull that off is if it's earlier in the fall season itself. You cannot host an outdoor duel when it's cold and potentially rainy and, God forbid, snowy. So if they are going to pull that off, it's going to have to be very early November, early October. And with that being said, if they do want to have the Beaver Stadium duel this season, and we've talked about opponents, it could be maybe in Iowa. And Oklahoma State, I think, would be really entertaining. That would really, I think that would put college wrestling in the national spotlight temporarily, but that would be a good boost for the marketing just by that matchup alone. The Beaver Stadium duel, if that is on the docket for 24-25, that dual meet would need to happen end of October, no later than early November. With that being said, if Penn State's going to do that, if they are going to be able to pull that off, then that means that the schedule would be released ahead of that October, most likely be ahead of that October target date. If they don't do the Beaver Stadium duel this year, Penn State is going to, because you got to market tickets and everything else. So that's why if there's a Beaver Stadium duel, you're going to need to be proactive like American University and drop that schedule immediately. I know there's the Big Ten Conference and everything else. It's not just on Penn State. I'm not trying to imply that. But the bottom line is Penn State will most likely release its schedule first week of October. If there is an earlier dual meet for that Beaver Stadium setup, then we might know about that weeks in advance instead, sometime in September. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, be a part of the discussion down in the comments section. Let me know your thoughts about Aaron Brooks, the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club out in Paris, and the schedule release itself, and the Beaver Stadium, the potential of the Beaver Stadium duel. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a like on the episode, share it with friends and family. If you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around Penn State wrestling and all of your favorite Penn State sports teams. Again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen, you have to check out Locked On College Football with host Spencer McLaughlin. I've been a guest on that show multiple times. I enjoy it a ton, and I know you will as well, as Spencer is gearing you up for an exciting and incredible college football season, talking about NIL, the impact of the transfer portal, and of course, conference realignment, the expanded college football playoff. Spencer covers it all over at Locked On College Football. Again, that's Locked On College Football, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day.